You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your game tickets from the longtime trusted source in Wisconsin, Ticket King. Visit their locations in Milwaukee and Green Bay, or just go to their website, theticketking.com. Again, that's theticketking.com.
New York Bozo! New York Bozo! New York Bozo!
I got to get my biceps a little bigger.
Yeah, you can always work on that.
Or I could sure use a hot dog with chili.
You know what time the game starts? Hey, you got any left-handed footballs? We need to fire him. Is anybody else tired or is it just me? Good thing I'm in shape. You got any eligibility left? I got some advice for y'all. Take 2 weeks off, then quit.
What's up, Packers fans? We're coming at you with another episode of Pack to the Future, coming off of a victory, a Week 1 victory, which just something about winning in Week 1 feels extra special, so we're in really good moods tonight. I'm your host, Brian Fonfera. I know we introduced John last week as the new host, but he's got some family stuff going on, so he's in our thoughts and prayers, and he'll be back with us next week for sure. Along with me, I do have Dusty Evely. Dusty, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I had a good weekend. We had a win. I just had some brats on the grill. It's a good day. It's a good day. I'm very excited.
All you had to say was brats on the grill. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Packers could have lost. Packers could have lost by 30. It still would have been a decent day.
That's true. That's true.
If the brats had sauerkraut.
Yes.
Well, of course.
Okay. All right, and we've also got Jordan Peck. What's going on in Virginia, Jordan?
Oh, it's a beautiful day every day here in Virginia, guys. You're missing out. You're missing out over there in your Midwest and Mountain time zones or whatever. So.
Virginia is for lovers, and that is why Jordan moved there.
You got it.
All right. We've got a lot to get to, so why don't we get going? We'll get right to our coin toss segment. For those that are new to our podcast, this is a new segment for us as well. What we do is we take 3 topics from the previous week and we discuss them, but to make sure that there's some debate going and we're covering both sides of it, we flip a coin to determine who covers which side. So our first one is going to be about David Bakhtiari. Just signed a brand new contract, 5 years added to his deal. $12 million per year. It's a lot of money, and we're going to discuss it right now about whether or not that was a good move. So, Jordan, it's you against me in this one, and I'm going to flip this coin. If it is heads, you will tell me why it was a good move. If it is tails, you will tell me why we overpaid.
Alrighty.
And it is tails. Jordan, tell us why we overpaid.
Okay. David Bakhtiari he's a very good left tackle, above average left tackle, but I don't think he's gotten himself to the elite level. What I think has happened with left tackles, I think other teams have themselves overpaid for, mediocre to average level left tackles, and that kind of drove the price up for Bakhtiari. So, if you wanted to sign him to an extension, this was coming. So that's not that much of a surprise, but it still is. You kind of wish you'd have something a little bit better going for a guy like David Bakhtiari, or a guy like David Bakhtiari playing left tackle. So, it's nice that we got him locked up. It gives us good. Obviously, don't have to worry about that at the end of the offseason. But time will tell whether this was a good signing. But it would be nice to have seen a little bit more elite play from him, particularly last season and over the course of his career.
All right, I get that. But I'm going to go ahead and counter that, and there are some easy points. The state of offensive lines in the NFL is pretty abysmal. So when you have a left tackle, even if he's not elite, but he can effectively cover your blind side of your franchise quarterback, you got to lock that up. He's still young. There's still room for him to even improve, and he's had a really good career so far. Not elite level, but, with the cap rising in 2 years, $12 million for a left tackle is not going to be elite money anymore. So, once some of these young guns get their extensions at 14 and 15 million, 12 million is going to look just fine for David Bakhtiari. We need continuity on this line with Josh Sitton out, and now we've got that at left tackle. We've had, the rest of the line is still intact, so yeah, I think it's a really big move. I'm really happy with it. And yeah, like I said, it's just you kind of had to. You don't know what you have with Jason Spriggs. He could come in and be an elite left tackle as well, or he could come in and be like Derek Sherrod, who just never pans out. So you take the sure thing when you've got it, and Bakhtiari is that sure thing.
Yeah, to add another point to what I was saying, and to go on with along with Jason Spriggs' talk, is I do wonder if any of the play of Spriggs during the preseason really kind of pushed them to make this move quicker. The timing is not very ironic, because after the Sitton move, you wanted to make sure this got locked down, but you wonder, like, you drafted Spriggs. In fact, you traded up to get Spriggs in the second round. People were kind of just assuming that, well, this guy, they're picking to be the left tackle of the future. Then this move happens with Bakhtiari, so it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, and it also gives them flexibility. They can move Spriggs inside, they can move Bulaga inside, and Spriggs to right tackle in the future.
Right.
And for right now, they still have that depth, so it's a good problem to have, especially having lost Sitton.
I would agree.
All right, Dusty, you're the impartial third party. Who wins that round?
I'm gonna go with Brian. I liked your fire.
Score. Whew. Must be because I've been drinking Fireballs all night.
Oh, good God. Yeah.
No,
That's probably why.
I know that's not true.
That's absolutely not true. No. All right. Moving on. Our next topic is Jared Cook. Very mixed reactions when he signed in the offseason. Put together a really good camp and made some big plays in the preseason, and for the most part was pretty invisible on Sunday. So what we want to discuss is who is the real Jared Cook, and will he please stand up? So I'm going to flip a coin. If it is heads, I'm going to tell you why Jared Cook is going to be awesome. If it's tails, I'll tell you why everybody should panic and probably just burn down their homes. And it is heads. So I get to be positive twice in one day. That's exciting. All right. Jared Cook, he's still new to the playbook. I don't remember him playing a whole lot in the preseason. He made the most of his opportunities then. This is regular season, though. You're seeing fully schemed defenses, and that was a pretty good defense that we played against, so I'm really not too worried. I think he only had one catch. He also went deep downfield and drew a pass interference play. That's something that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but it did set up a touchdown towards the end of the first half. And, he's going to develop into that presence in the middle of the field, which we need so badly. And, he'll have pressure taken off of him because, Richard Rodgers looked pretty good in week 1. So, once those two tight end sets come, once he feels more comfortable with the playbook and Rodgers feels more comfortable, throwing to him, you mentioned not having a lot of playing time in the preseason. Aaron Rodgers didn't have a whole lot of time to get on the same page as his receivers. So as the weeks go on, there's going to be more and more of a camaraderie between the quarterback and the tight end, and he's gonna make his impact felt soon enough.
So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna say that you're wrong. I was talking about Jared Cook.
Too many wrongs.
I was talking about Jared Cook a lot before the season, that people were very, very excited about him, and I would basically told people to just pump your brakes, because his entire career, Jared Cook has been seen as a physical freak with upside, just a field stretching tight end that can go downfield, run like a. I think he came out with like a 4.4, 4.5 or something. But he's never really shown that in his career. If his best season was, let's see, where was he? Oh yeah, 52 catches for 634 yards. That's his best season. His best season in terms of yards per game was 2013, when he averaged just a shade under 42 yards per game. His catch percentage has decreased every single year in the league, which I know the argument to that, which I've said before, is that, yeah, but he's played with terrible quarterbacks. Well, the studies have been done. I think Football Outsiders kind of ran this and said it doesn't really matter who your quarterback is. Your catch percentage is only going to fluctuate by a few percentage points either way. And he's gone from 64 to 60 to 52% percent, but he's dropped every single year. Last year he was at 52%, which is just atrocious. And it's not just catch radius; his hands are just rubbish. So, you mentioned the defensive pass interference, which was good. It was a 20-yarder, set up that touchdown at the end of the first half, which was huge for them. But he ended the game not just one reception for 7 yards, but only 2 targets, 3 if you count the defensive pass interference one, which like you said doesn't show up in the stat sheet. But he looked really good in the preseason. But that was the preseason, and maybe they'll find a spot for him. But the history of Jared Cook suggests that this is what he is. That he's going to do better than 1 catch for 7 yards, but he's not going to be the huge threat that everyone was kind of hoping he would be when the Packers signed him.
All right. Jordan, impartial third party. Who's the winner?
Ooh, I'm gonna give that one to Dusty. You guys. Truth be told, that was a really good argument. I mean, every point on both sides, you guys stressed with that. But for me, it's we get excited about some of these free agent guys for the Packers, and it hasn't happened too much, particularly on the offensive side. Just small body of work, but I think it's a lot to just assume that Cook's gonna go out there and be a stud. So I'm more on the glass half empty side with him, to be honest. And not to mention, Mick McCarthy and the offensive play callers are in love with Richard Rodgers. So you kind of see Cook right now as a tight end too, with the way they play call for Rodgers.
Yeah. I remember the offseason, I was not pumped at all about his signing, and I kind of spent the rest of the time talking myself into why he was going to be a really good tight end for us, and not a good early showing.
No.
So he definitely needs to step up. So I'm all right with Dusty taking that point. All right, let's see if Jordan can win any points here in our final coin toss. Probably not, because I'm the impartial third party on this one, and I cannot promise that I'll actually be impartial. All right, the run defense had a really good week. They held TJ Yeldon pretty well, and that's a pretty good running back in my eyes. Had him on my fantasy team last year, and that's the only reason I know about him, if I'm being honest. But he put up some pretty good points. Seemed like he was scoring a touchdown almost every week last year, putting up a decent amount of yards. So I expected him to gash us up a little bit with Pennell out. So the run defense, are they going to keep it up? They have a big test against Adrian Peterson this week, and then whoever else past that. I don't even know who plays running back for the Lions anymore. It's always somebody different. But tests are coming up, so let's hear him. All right, Dusty, I'm going to flip this coin. If it is heads, you are going to tell me why the run defense is going to keep it up, and if it is tails, you are going to tell me why they are going to burn. It is tails. Dusty, why should we be concerned about the run defense?
Because they looked really good, but there were so many just weird fluky performances. I saw Guyon in there mixing it up, which his career suggests that he will have one good running game every 3 or 4 games. Very good pass rusher, usually gets put on skates in the run game. So to see him kind of back there, that's not something that's going to happen. Mike Daniels is good. You can't really say anything about Daniels. He's always going to be back there. But I also had on some of the big plays. I can't remember the exact play. Joe Thomas, like all 220 pounds of Joe Thomas, just bum rushed the line and blew the play up. And that's not something you're going to see. I really like Joe Thomas, but he's more of a coverage guy, and he's doing very well there. I think he's going to have a good year there, but he's not a run defender. Nick Perry had a good game against the run. Most of his career suggests that Nick Perry is terrible against the run, or at least below average against the run. Clay Matthews was missing tackles. It was nice seeing Dayton Jones get back there. He looks good, but Peppers did nothing, and he slipped against the run last year as well. So, they had a very good performance against. I mean, it's Jacksonville, so they're not necessarily known as like a huge running team. They had, I believe, their rushing offense was middle of the pack. I think they were worse than that. According to Football Outsiders, they're 28th in the league last year at their rushing attack. So, they're not a good running team. So they bottled them up, and that was great. But that was not a great team they faced. So between that and the Vikings being, I think their rushing offense was 8th last year. So they're having a big bump up this week against the Vikings did against the Jaguars. Combine that with some of the more fluky performances we saw, possibly as a result of a weak Jaguars running defense or rushing offense. That I can't see them repeating that. And really, I think until Pennell comes back, I think they're gonna have a rough time. And this week's not gonna be pretty. I don't think against the Vikings with Peterson back there.
To counter that, Dusty, I would agree with a few of the things there. To write off some of those performances as fluky. I mean, that may turn out to be true, but I mean, we've been seeing. You talk about Joe Thomas and how he's more of a coverage back. It seemed like all the plays he was making was right around the line of scrimmage during this game, which was fantastic to see. As you mentioned with Daniels, you know what you're going to get with Daniels. Matthews had a couple missed tackles, but again, he also had a couple big tackles for loss in this game. You got Detone Jones, he was pushing linemen this past game. You got Nick Perry. What's nice about those two guys is you got Jones and Perry both going into a contract year, or they're in a contract year. Excuse me, they're going to be unrestricted free agents. So at the end of the season, so you kind of expect them to be playing with a little more flair. That's usually how it goes with a lot of these guys. I mean, you had guys like Jake Ryan. Jake Ryan didn't have a particularly good game, but he's another guy that even last year had a nose for getting to the ball in the run game. So while the Packers did catch a break, not having to deal with Chris Ivory, who was supposed to be there, more featured back, certainly more featured than TJ Yeldon. We did catch a break with that, but I think there's things we can do. I think you can't do any worse than what Peterson did against the Titans, but I foresee them still having a good chance of at least not letting Peterson take over the game on Sunday and keeping going until Pennell comes back. Once Pennell comes back, that just fortifies our ability to be a good rush defense.
Ooh, this is a tough winner to declare. But for the sake of staying positive, Jordan had the positive topic, so I'll give it to him. I am concerned, though. I'll be honest. I'm concerned. Yeah, this is not a great running attack that we were up against, we'll admit.
No.
I like Yeldon, but, again, not a great running back. And a really poor offensive line overall. So,
I mean, still, though, to counter the point I just made, which I believe most of that wholeheartedly, like there's been years in the past where we've gone up against bad running attacks and have been destroyed by them. So to put up a good performance against a poor rushing attack, that's still an improvement than where this team had been, especially without Pennell and Raji this year as well. So I mean, there are reasons to be optimistic for sure.
All right, I like it. So we each came away with a win this time. A little boring, but that's just the way the cookie crumbled. So deal with it.
Everybody gets a trophy.
Everybody gets this is not a participation podcast.
You guys, this is what James Harrison was talking about. You guys, this is exactly what he was talking about.
All right. Before we move on to talking about next week against the Vikings, we're going to get a word about our sponsor, Pride and Glory Clothing. Jordan, tell us about Pride and Glory Clothing.
Well, Brian already gave the name away, but yeah, Pride and Glory Clothing. We've been sponsored by them for we're getting close. I don't know. It was towards the end of last season. But if you haven't checked out their website, prideandglory63.com, that's the numbers 63.com. They have some really cool Packers designs for their shirts. We've mentioned, I think, every week when I talk about them. Their design of the Lombardi sweep on the shirts. I mean, that's just a fantastic shirt. I think me and Dusty both own. Some really cool clothing. They got some new designs out. I believe I mentioned last week too. They have a shirt even for the ladies. So all the ladies can check out that website as well. So it's prideandglory63.com.
All right. Cool. Let's move on and let's introduce our guest this week, Eric Thompson of the Daily Norseman. Eric, how you doing? All right, good to have you, man. I remember having you last year. We had a lot of fun talking to you, and
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Let's get right to it. So tell us, I mean, you have to be on just this roller coaster of emotions here. Teddy Bridgewater goes down injured in a year that you thought would be a Super Bowl year. You trade a first and a fourth to get Sam Bradford. You pull away a victory on a couple of really good defensive plays in Tennessee. Where's your optimism level here? Are you still thinking Super Bowl?
I'm thinking I wish it could be August 30th again. I think that would be the ideal. And then it'd be a lot more positive talking to you right now. Obviously, losing the star quarterback and, to be honest, everything that we saw out of Bridgewater in the preseason and when I was at training camp covering it in Mankato, it really looked like Bridgewater was poised to take that really big next step in his third season. I don't know if he was going to be one of the elite quarterbacks, but I definitely think the way that he was throwing the ball, the way his decision making was going, and just how he was leading the team, I think he was really going to be towards the upper half of the league. And with the rest of the roster that the Vikings have this season, I think he didn't need to be an elite quarterback, but if he was above average, the word Super Bowl were getting thrown around definitely. And now with Sam Bradford, who is probably one of the more frustrating quarterbacks throughout his career, who's shown some promise and definitely hasn't lived up to all the millions of dollars he's made throughout his career, and giving up what the Vikings did to get him, that'll tend to knock down the levels of optimism a little bit. There's still hope, even with Sean Hill just playing okay last week. They took care of business in Tennessee thanks to that defense that we knew was going to be good.
Such a shame. All the characters.
I feel a lot more confident with number 5 on our center going into Sunday night.
Randy
if he was
Mosses,
there.
who have just been universally hated by the entire state of Wisconsin. You finally have a good guy in a very important position on your team that nobody can hate, and his knee just explodes. Ugh. Mm-hmm.
And on a non-contact drill, and basically, and what he suffered with a dislocated knee and severing or tearing what has only been called multiple ligaments so far, which might mean, it's definitely the ACL, but it could be PCL, MCL, a couple other things, who knows. But, it's a bad injury when the phrase "just an ACL tear" is getting thrown around, because it sounded so terrible after it happened. And of course, just on a drop back on a practice that he's done thousands of times throughout his career. It's just so unfortunate. And yeah, like you mentioned, of course, Packers and Vikings fans are always going to give each other hell, but this was pretty much universally met with sympathy on both sides. It's such a shame to see such a promising player, and overall from all accounts and from all my experiences,
and I mean, just losing
such a
your
good person.
It's
really tough to
we went through that a few years
stomach,
back with
especially
Rodgers. We know
going
how it
into such a
feels,
hopeful
and
season.
It's not cool for anybody. Oh man, we don't need to talk about Christian Ponder.
Yeah, you end up tying Christian Ponder at home when you lose your quarterback.
Moving on to the game in Tennessee. Adrian Peterson, tell us about him, because by all accounts it looked like a pretty poor game, and we're not used to seeing that from Adrian Peterson. Was it that your offensive line struggled? Was it him? Was it the run defense against you? Like, what went wrong, and can we expect it to go wrong again on Sunday?
Well, your answer to the first 3 or 4 questions is yes. Just about everything that could have gone wrong with that run offense did. You have to give a little bit of credit to the Tennessee front 7, or 8 or 9, which is more accurate for how much they pack the box. They did a pretty good job. They definitely made it tough on the blockers, but it was a really disappointing performance by the offensive line. I think that's kind of where it stemmed from. I think I read something today that Peterson averaged something crazy low, like 0.3 yards per carry before contact. So basically he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage right away. A couple of those runs I will have to put on Peterson, because he missed a couple holes, but he just couldn't get going all day, which isn't totally surprising, because when you have Sean Hill at quarterback, you're not going to really scare anyone. So Tennessee definitely did pack the box, but a lot of those times too, Vikings ran big sets, and they had the tight ends and extra tight ends and the blockers to block. They just didn't execute. So I think it starts with the offensive line. I don't think we should press the panic button on, oh no, Adrian Peterson's fallen off a cliff because he's 31 years old. From what I've saw in the training camp, of course, he never plays in the preseason, so it might just be knocking rust off, which is a whole other issue. Maybe he should start playing in the preseason to not have to warm up in the first game. But I think he'll be okay as long as he gets that space. But yeah, it's especially a couple players like Alex Boone, who's supposed to be just the smaller that we brought in at left guard. I thought he had a pretty poor game along the left side. So it was kind of a reverse of what we expected from the offensive line, because the pass blocking was the big concern, and they didn't even allow a sack on Sunday. So
tell me,
the pass blocking was
better
what the
than
Vikings
expected,
and the run blocking,
Sunday,
unfortunately, was much worse than
to
expected.
get a win, and give me a score prediction. What's going to happen?
Well, I think to win, they're going to have to play mistake-free football again. They had 0 turnovers and they had 0 sacks allowed, and they forced 3 turnovers. I think the same kind of formula is going to have to happen, because I don't think it's realistic, whether it's Bradford or Hill under center on Sunday night, that they can just go possession for possession with Aaron Rodgers and all the weapons they have on that Green Bay offense. And because even Jacksonville, who held up pretty nicely, I thought, but they have a lot more offensive weapons, I think, than the Vikings currently do. So I think it's just going to be, you're going to have to win the turnover battle, not beat yourself. And, it's the old cliche, we're just going to have someone that's just kind of manage the game at quarterback and control that time of possession, because the longer that Adrian Peterson and that rushing offense is on the field, that means they're being more successful, and that means Aaron Rodgers has less time to hurt them on the defensive end. So they're just going to have to play good opportunistic football, hopefully get behind that crowd that should be fired up for the first ever game at US Bank Stadium, and just make the most of the opportunities that do come up, because that's what you have to do against a good team like
US
the Packers.
Stadium,
is when
the
opportunities do arise, you have to capitalize, or else you're going
to
to find yourself behind pretty early.
Just so everyone's aware. All right, score prediction. What's going to happen?
I haven't written my preview. I usually do that on Wednesday nights and Thursday mornings, but so I still want to watch a little more film on exactly what kind of worked and what didn't for Jacksonville, and kind of, I hate to hedge my bets too much on who the quarterback's going to be, because personally I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, because I think Sean Hill acquitted himself actually pretty nicely. He handled the little pressure that he did get well enough. He had a hilarious 7-yard scramble on 3rd and 11 where he literally had to go get his ankles taped after trying to juke a guy. I thought that was pretty funny. So, but anyway, right now, before doing more research, I would probably, this pains me to say, especially opening a new stadium, the Packers, I'd say something like 23-17.
All right, tell us about your website and where
I
fans can find you on
withhold
Twitter.
my final score prediction until I actually write my article this week. I am always writing at dailynorseman.com. That's the SB Nation Viking site. And you can find me on Twitter at the super convenient at Eric_J_Thompson.
Fans, give him a follow. He's one of those guys that finds a way to be a Viking fan and a pretty good guy all at the same time. So, yeah, you do a good job. All right, thanks very much for joining us, Eric.
It's a hard combination, but I try to pull it off.
That
yes,
guy. Eric Thompson, he's good.
Big fan.
Solid. Yep.
All right, so
All
let's
right,
get
thanks for
to
having
our
me on, guys.
thoughts. Now, we already have one person saying Packers victory. I guarantee you, if Bridgewater was healthy, he would have said a Vikings victory, and some of us might have done the same. Before we get to this, I was going to brag, because my prediction last week for the Jaguars game was 27-24 Packers, and I was only 1 point off. So I was all ready to brag, and then I had a phone call with John, and he reminded me that his prediction was 27-23 Packers. So he had it exactly right. So I have to give the credit where it's due. Well done, John.
It's impressive. It's impressive from both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I was feeling pretty good about myself, and now, I've been outdone.
Yeah, stop feeling good about yourself, Brian.
It won't happen again, I promise.
All right.
It won't. All right. I'm going to kick this off by telling you what I think the Packers need to do to win. Something that Eric brought up was that crowd noise. I mentioned this last week against the Jaguars, but both myself and our guest last week, Jordan DeLugo, totally overestimated the Jaguars fan base. I saw way too many empty seats there, and I thought crowd noise was going to be a huge factor. It just wasn't. This will be a different case. This game is already sold out, as is every other home game for the Vikings this year. Brand new stadium. Even without Bridgewater in there, there's still hope that this can be a good team, at the very least a playoff team. So for me, you have to stop Adrian Peterson early. You have to slow down their run game. You have to get the ball in our hands and get some sustained drives so that the fans get pissed off and stop cheering. Because if they... The research on this stadium is that the new roof is going to be more sound reflective, so it could be even louder than the old pile of garbage they used to play in. So you have to establish yourselves early and control that crowd noise. The other thing is to use the middle of the field. I'm going to go back to last year. I had a friend visiting from Australia. We watched the Packers versus the Cardinals late last season. First time he'd ever sat down and watched an NFL game. And he asked me why we weren't using the middle of the field, because it seemed to him that when the ball leaves the quarterback's hands, the fastest place for it to go is the middle of the field. And neither offensively or defensively were we establishing ourselves in the middle. We were playing on the flanks the whole time. And I'm thinking, how is it that a guy watching his first NFL game gets this, but McCarthy and the rest of this offense don't? Just, you have to eventually establish yourself. It's why we brought in Jared Cook, is to establish the middle of the field. It's why we drafted Blake Martinez, why we drafted Kenny Clark. You have to take away the middle of the field, or we're just going to keep on getting burned, especially on those big plays like we saw, like all those fourth downs. You know, we did well on third down this week, but defensively we just kept on letting them convert fourth downs until that one fateful one at the end of the game. Have to shut down the middle of the field defensively and have to establish yourselves offensively. Do those two things and you can win big. I don't trust us to do those two things, but I still think we'll win, just not big. Pretty similar to last week. I'm going to say 20-14. Packers are going to take care of business and get this win. Kick it over to Jordan. Jordan, tell us what's the biggest matchup that we're going to see this weekend? What's the X factor there?
Well, for me, the couple things I was really looking at is looking against our secondary against their receivers. Our secondary, by all accounts, you know, going into the Jaguars game, people thought the secondary was one of our strong points, and they got burned quite a few times. A lot of big plays they gave up. So, and against the Vikings, their receiving core certainly isn't as strong as the Jaguars' receiving core, but they still have Stephon Diggs, even speedsters like Cordarrelle Patterson, even though he's completely, you know, he's been on a decline for quite a while, still capable of the big play. And for the Packers, they just can't give up the big play at all to this Vikings team. We all know Peterson is capable of those big plays. The Vikings are going to move the ball. Pretty much every team moves the ball against the Packers. We're going to give up first downs. But the key at the end of drives is we got to hold them to field goals, punts, or turnover. We can't be giving up a whole lot of touchdowns here. Then I think the only way that's really going to happen is if we just give up a lot of big pass plays, a lot of chunk yards, a lot of big plays to Peterson. So I'm just going to be a little generic and a little general, but say the defense versus any big plays that the Vikings can have. If we limit those, I think it'll be okay. I think it'd be a close game. I think the Packers offense is going to have a lot of trouble moving the ball, to be quite honest with you. It's going to be a really loud crowd. I mean, from what I've heard, that this stadium is on pace to break a lot of noise records that have been set in the NFL. So, I mean, it's going to be loud. It's going to be hopping. I think the offense is going to have a lot of issues with that in the first half. But I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go even closer than you. I'm going to go 20-17, Green Bay.
Whew. Yeah, I'm totally expecting another nail biter. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Dusty, lay some numbers on us. Give us your stats heading into this.
All right, I got just a few different things I kind of wanted to highlight. One of which you brought up with your sad anecdote about your Australian friend, Brian. So the middle of the field, is absolutely a dead spot. We were joking before the podcast here that one of the coin toss segments was going to be if they really believe that the middle of the field was filled with lava, and I don't really believe that they believe that, but they don't use it. It's no surprise that Jaguars went for it on fourth down 4 times. 2 of those attempts came in the middle of the field, which came very, very easy. And the one that failed was a little bubble screen out to the right. So that's not surprising in the least. This past week, when throwing to the middle of the field, Bortles was 13 for 19. So that's like 68% completion percentage for 160 yards, which is 8.4 yards per attempt. Everywhere else, he completed 55% of his passes for 8 yards an attempt. So like basically the same amount of yards per attempt, but his completion percentage shot up from 55 to 68. And if we want to go on the other side of the ball, to say that the offense doesn't use the middle of the field either, when throwing to the middle of the field, Rodgers only attempted 4 passes to the middle of the field this past week. Again, Bortles threw 19. Rodgers threw 14 to the middle of the field. Do you guys have any guesses to how many of those he completed?
I'm going to say 1.
Rodgers completed 4. In the middle of the field, Rodgers was 4 for 4 for 73 yards, and I believe both touchdowns came in the middle of the field. So that was 18.3 yards per attempt. When throwing everywhere else, 53% for 126 yards or 4.2 yards per attempt. Now, granted, it's inflated because it's a small sample. You know, you got 4 versus 30 attempts. I get it, but at the same time, man, those are huge numbers. Those are just huge numbers. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Jared Cook defensive pass interference would technically have gone to the middle of the field. The defense, that's the thing, they're targeting them. They're targeting the middle of the field, the defenses are, but the offense is not targeting the middle of the field. So that's one. They have to start using the middle of the field, and they also have to start defending the middle of the field, and that was the whole thing with Blake Martinez, is that he'd be able to do that. And I have not watched the film yet. I'm actually doing that right after this, but he looked lost at times. He's a rookie, but he wasn't the problem. It was Capers just deciding to stack the line and play safeties 20 yards back. And, hey, on 4th and 5, let's just have our corners who struggle today play one-on-one on the outside where a quick slant could beat them with no one in the middle to help. It's baffling, and if it was just Blake Martinez, if it was just a rookie, if it was just a player, I think I'd feel okay. The fact that it's Capers, I don't believe it's going to change. So
no.
It's disheartening. So that's one that makes me sad. So I'm gonna hit a couple others real quick. So we talked about Peterson. He can break some big plays. Peterson last year, 57.6% of his runs went for 3 yards or less. 21% of those, or 22% of his overall runs actually lost yardage. And if we're looking at comparison's sake, last week, and I was talking about how the Jaguars did not have a good run offense, which is true, Yeldon had just slightly fewer of his go for 3 yards or less. So Yeldon had 57.4% of his runs go for 3 yards or less. Peterson 57.6. So he can be stuffed at the line. Now we all know that he can break them big, but he also gets bottled up quite a bit. And so if the Packers can bottle him up, which as they showed this past week they are capable of, and the Vikings line is terrible, if they can shoot through like they did against the Jaguars, they really could have they could have great games stopping the run. But again, like Jordan said, all it takes is one run, and we know if there's anyone in the league against us, or anyone, I guess, that can break a big run, it's absolutely Adrian Peterson. Yeah. The last thing I want to bring up, and I'll be quick because I'm running way over, is Rob Domofsky at ESPN had a great little stat, it's a terrible little stat, where against Zimmer in his career, Rodgers' completion percentage is down 6%, passing yards per game down 40, yards per attempt down a little over 1. He's sacked about 1 more time per game, has 0.5 less touchdowns, and his passer rating is down 15 points. That's just against Zimmer. That's not Vikings. That's when he was with the Bengals as well as a coordinator there. So Zimmer knows how to play Aaron Rodgers. The big thing for me, the biggest stat I would like to point out here that translates over to this game would be his interception per game against Zimmer is exactly the same as it is the rest of his career. And if you watch this past week, the Vikings game, move the ball decently. They couldn't really score, and their two big touchdowns came off a Mariota interception that was terrible and a botched handoff fumble that went back the other way for a touchdown. So 2 defensive touchdowns. Packers are not going to give him that, and Rodgers throughout his career against Zimmer has not shown that he's going to throw any more interceptions against him. So if they can hold on to the ball and not create turnovers, I think this game's going to be a slog to get through. Jordan mentioned, I think the defense is, the Vikings defense is dynamite. I think the Packers are going to have a really, really hard time with them. But if they can limit their turnovers, whether it's Sean Hill or Sam Bradford under center, it doesn't really matter. If the Packers limit their turnovers, I think they win this game. And I think it's going to be real ugly. But I see the Packers. I really wanted to call it a Packers win 17-16 with Blair Walsh missing an extra point with like 10 seconds left, which, may end up happening. I'm going to go Packers 17-10.
Ooh, all right. So none of us going for the real high-scoring stuff, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Given how poor their offense is and how good their defense is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Jordy came out of the gate last week looking like Jordy and looking like they had timing, I think we'd all be singing a different song. But since they struggled, it's hard to peg them for putting up huge points, especially looking at, I mean, Titans are kind of terrible, but what the Vikings did against Tennessee, it's hard to ignore that and just say, well, the Packers are going to be fine because they struggled against a poor Jaguars defense this past week at times.
Yeah. Well, what we really need from Jordy is for him to have his legs back under him by the time we're out of that bye week. Yeah, I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
Mm-hmm.
All right, final thoughts. I'll go first here. First of all, the one thing that really made my blood boil on Sunday was our final drive. We had a chance to ice this game and put it away, put the dagger in the Jaguars. We failed to, so it was 3rd down. We failed to get the playoff in time, called a timeout. Okay, fine, that happens. But then coming out of that timeout, we had to take a delay of game penalty because we still couldn't get the play out. And that just to me was so unacceptable in a professional team. It's just not cool, not okay. Have to be better than that. I'll give you a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because it was week 1, but communication on offense needs to improve here. Having said that, a lot of anger on Twitter and in forums and everywhere else I was where, we struggled a bit offensively, we struggled a bit defensively. I'm fine with that because good teams, when they don't play their best, good teams still find ways to win, and that's what we did on Sunday. It came down to one play, and we made that one play. Now, in my mind, we have a lot of areas where we can improve, but a lot of those areas we are going to improve, so I think we're going to go up from here. We slugged out a victory. All right, so where to find me on Twitter, by the way, I am at TTSO_Brian. Find our podcast Twitter account at PTTF_podcast. Jordan, give us your final thoughts and your Twitter.
All right, final thought for this game. I think it was back in the early 2000s. It was a Packers-Vikings game in week 1. Newly renovated Lambeau Field, new atrium, a lot of excitement, a lot of confidence, a lot of optimism going into that week 1 game, and the Vikings came in and spoiled the party. So 13 years later, I think it is time for the Packers to spoil the Vikings party. At what did you call it? The Stapler?
The Stapler.
The Stapler. U.S. Banks. I like it.
Should have been the Swingline Stadium, but
I like how much rage you have that you've been holding in for those many years, Jordan.
I remember.
You're just waiting for your revenge. I love it.
I remember that game. I remember that game very clearly. Oh, and by the way, you can find me on Twitter at JGPeck41.
All right, Dusty, final thoughts and Twitter.
So I've got a couple Twitter questions. Do you want me to bring those up after my final thoughts, or just do them now?
Let's do them now.
Okay. Actually, one is a question, and it was a 4-parter, so I smashed them all together. And then the other one is just kind of a thought that I enjoyed, so I assume that you will as well. So first question is from, again, Armand Hammer. It's at Tuscan Count. So this is not a Packers specific. It's around the league question. It Drew Brees has averaged around 5,000 yards since 2011, despite a lackluster receiving core. He just re-signed to the Saints at an extremely cap-friendly price for the next 2 foreseeable years. Do the Saints scramble for talent to take advantage of another legitimate Super Bowl run since Brees clearly wants it? How do you predict this might shake out? And since I read it, I will start. I would say if I thought the Saints organization was actually smart at this point, yeah, I think they want it. I don't think Mickey Loomis has shown that he is, that he's going to do it. He'll just overpay for a middling free agent, and then they'll just be cash strapped again. I mean, they tried to trade for Josh Sitton, but then they couldn't afford him. They tried to fit Josh Sitton, a 30-year-old. Now, I love Josh Sitton, but a 30-yard with a history of a bad back that they thought that's a left guard that they thought was the missing piece to their offense, that they're willing to try to fit him under their already cap strap team. That does not strike me as the mark of a smart team. Mm-hmm. So I can see them going for it. I don't trust in them to actually make a smart move about it. What do you guys think?
I agree completely. I think they're going to add somebody for a large amount of money at the receiver or tight end position, and it's just not going to pan out. And in order to make the way for the money, they're probably going to sacrifice more defensive players on what's already, if not then one of the worst defenses in this league, and has been for several years. Yeah, I see them going after some talent, but I don't see them going about it in a smart way. So they'll do it, but they're going to fail.
They're arguably the worst team in that division, so I don't know what player they could add to even get them into the wild card hunt. I mean, the Falcons aren't that good of a team, but even the Falcons, I think, are better than the Saints. They're not probably touching where the Buccaneers are this year, and they have the defending NFC champion in their division. That's they'd be selling out a lot to probably, in my opinion, not even make the playoffs. So, yeah, I agree with you guys in their poor management, but I mean, it's whatever move they make is not going to help them this season.
Yeah, so they'll try, but they'll fail.
Right.
Okay, and the second one is just a thought or something's thrown our way. It's again Arm & Hammer, not a question. I just felt that the podcast should be aware of one Jordy's Farm Flake cereal now sold at Woodman's. So if someone would like to pick us up a box and send us each a box, I believe we would all appreciate it. I found so this is odd. So I think I've talked about this before. I'm a Tigers baseball fan. I'm originally from the Detroit area, even though I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and have for over 20 years now. I walked into the Lexington, Kentucky Meijer a couple years ago to find Justin Verlander's fastball flakes on the shelf. So nice. So here's to hoping that Jordy's Farm Flakes make it down here to Lexington.
There's always hope.
Mm-hmm. There is. All right. Good questions. Thank you, sir. My final thought, I talked a lot about football. I will not talk about football here. So this past weekend, I drove up to Indianapolis. It was about a 3-hour drive for me, and went to Horror Hound, which is a horror convention up in Indy. It's at the Indianapolis Marriott, which I'd heard a lot about, and it was awesome. I just kind of spent the day hanging out, got to see a whole lot of weird masks and freaks and weirdos and just my people, man. Celebrities doing weird random things, and so I saw Michael Rooker just holding a screaming child and just laughing about it. That just absolutely killed me. So if you're into horror, or if you're into any comic book stuff at all, if you've not been to any kind of convention, comic book convention or anything like that, man, if one comes through your area, I highly recommend it. I've been going for like the past 3 or 4 years to local ones, and it's just a blast. So always a great time. I had a huge blast at Horror Hound up in Indy. So just wanted to throw that out there. Just give it a shot if you haven't. You can find me Twitter at Dusty Evely.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. Shout out to Titletown Sound Off and Tundra Talk, the other 2 podcasts that we have on TitletownSoundoff.com. Thanks again to Eric Thompson for joining us. Awesome guy. And one more shout out to our new host who couldn't make it tonight, John Jameson. Hope everything's going all right for you, buddy. All right. Let's go Packers. Get another win. Go Pack, go.
Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.